Someone you love is going to die. You already know this. You have always known this. And yet, when it happens, something breaks inside you that no amount of knowing ever prepared you for. You cry. You stare at walls. You eat food you cannot taste at a table that feels too wide. You stand in rooms full of people who loved the same person and somehow feel completely alone. You do not know what to do with your hands. You do not know what to say. You do not know how long this is supposed to last or what it is supposed to look like when it is finally over. Here is the strange part. Every single one of those feelings has a history, a very, very long history. And understanding what ancient humans actually did when someone died will not take away your grief. But it will do something almost as powerful. It will show you that grief is not a disorder. It is not a phase. It is not something to get through. It is the oldest human technology in the world. Your ancestors were burying their dead long before they invented the wheel. The earliest confirmed intentional burial ever discovered dates back roughly 130,000 years, found in a cave in what is now a rock called Shanidar Cave. Archaeologist Ralph Seletsky spent years excavating the site in the 1950s and uncovered the remains of a Neanderthal man, an elderly individual with severe physical disabilities, surrounded by what appeared to be flowers. Yarrow, groundsel, grape hyacinth, pollen clustered in patterns too deliberate to be accidental. This was not a modern human. This was not even your direct ancestor. This was a Neanderthal, a separate branch of the human family tree, standing over a body in a cave, placing flowers on the ground, doing something with the dead that could only be described as a ritual. They felt something. They responded to that feeling with action. They gathered. They marked the moment. They refused to let the body simply disappear into the earth without ceremony. Sound familiar? Now move forward in time. Not 130,000 years back, but closer to 60,000. In a cave in South Africa called Border Cave, researchers discovered the remains of a young child, no more than a few months old, buried in a shallow pit with a perforated shell nearby. The shell was almost certainly a personal ornament. Someone placed it there intentionally. Someone gave that baby something to carry into whatever came next. The grief in that gesture is not ancient. It is immediate. It crosses every distance. Archaeologist Francesco D'Erico, who has studied these early burial sites extensively, argues that the deliberate placement of objects with the dead is one of the clearest indicators of symbolic thinking in the archaeological record. When you bury someone with something, you are imagining a continuation. You are saying, this person is not simply gone. They're going somewhere. And they should not go empty-handed. Your brain is doing the same thing every time you pick a song for a funeral or argue with a sibling about what outfit to bury your parent in. You are participating in a cognitive tradition 60,000 years old. But here is where it gets stranger. Grief, as you know, it does not begin at the moment of death. Researcher Mary Frances O'Connor, a neuroscientist at the University of Arizona who has spent her career studying bereavement, describes grief as the price of love. More specifically, she frames it as a learning problem. Your brain has spent months or years building a detailed, predictive model of another person. Where they will be, when they will call, what they will say, what the house will smell like when they are home. Your brain has essentially installed another person as a permanent resident of its prediction system. When that person dies, the predictions keep firing. You reach for your phone to call them. You buy too much of their favorite food at the grocery store. You hear a song and feel your body move toward the chair where they used to sit. Your brain is not confused. It is updating. And updating a model that deeply embedded takes time. It is not weakness. It is literally the neurological cost of having loved someone enough to know them that well. Ancient humans understood this intuitively, even if they had no word for neuroscience. This is why nearly every early culture anthropologists have studied developed some form of mourning period. a designated window of time during which the community acknowledged that the person left behind was operating differently, was carrying something heavy, was not fully available for normal life. The ancient Egyptians mourned for 70 days while the body was being prepared. 70 days of formal community support, structured rituals, specific foods, specific clothing, specific prayers. The body was not the only thing being tended to. In hunter-gatherer societies, anthropologist Paul Rosenblatt documented across cultures a remarkable consistency. The people most grieved over were not always the oldest or the most powerful. They were often the most connected, the ones who held the web of the group together, the child whose laugh everyone knew, the elder who remembered the names of rivers. Grief, Rosenblatt argued, was not just personal. It was ecological. It was the community registering the loss of a thread in the fabric of its shared life. You feel that when you walk into your childhood home and one room is missing a person, the whole architecture of the place changes. But ancient humans did something else with their dead that modern culture has largely lost. They kept them close. In many prehistoric societies, the dead were not removed to a separate place. They were buried beneath the floors of the home. Researchers excavating Neolithic settlements in Turkey at a site called Çatalhöyük, dating back nearly 9,000 years, found body after body buried directly under the sleeping platforms of the living. Families literally slept above their ancestors. Generation upon generation pressed into the earth beneath the very floor you walked on every morning. This sounds strange to modern ears, but consider what it communicated. You are still here. You have not been erased. The boundary between the living and the dead is permeable, not absolute. We have not moved on from you. We have built our lives on top of you. There is a psychological function to that proximity that grief researchers are only beginning to quantify. Continuing bonds theory, developed by researchers Dennis Klass, Phyllis Silverman, and Stephen Nickman in the 1990s, challenged the long-dominant idea that healthy grieving meant detaching from the deceased. Their research found that maintaining an internal relationship with the person who died, talking to them, consulting them, feeling their presence, was not pathological. It was protective. It was exactly what the humans at Çatalhöyük were doing architecturally, keeping the dead close, refusing the clean break that modern culture pressures you to make. Your urge to keep a dead person's voicemail, to sleep on their side of the bed, to set their plate at Christmas. That is not dysfunction. That is the oldest coping strategy in the human behavioral toolkit. Now here is the counterintuitive part. Funerary rituals are not primarily about the dead. They are about the living. Every elaborate burial, every flower placed in a cave, every ornament tucked beside a child, every meal eaten over a grave, every candle lit, every name spoken aloud in a room full of people who knew that name and felt it land somewhere deep behind the sternum. None of that does anything for the dead. The dead are beyond it. It does everything for the living. Psychologist George Bonanno at Columbia University has studied grief trajectories for decades and identified something counterintuitive. Most people who experience loss are more resilient than the culture around them expects them to be. Not because they feel less, but because ritual and community absorption of grief actually work. The body needs a container. Communal mourning is that container. It externalizes something that would otherwise implode inward. When you cry at a funeral, your nervous system is not failing. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do, in exactly the context it was designed to do it in. You are surrounded by other bodies who knew the same person. Their presence regulates yours. The ritual gives the grief a shape. And a shape, even a painful one, is more manageable than formlessness. Your ancestors knew this. They built entire social architectures around it. You can trace a direct line from a Neanderthal pressing flowers into the earth of a cave in Iraq 130,000 years ago to you standing at a graveside in whatever coat you chose that morning, holding a flower you did not know you would need, not knowing what to do with your hands. The flower has not changed. The loss has not changed. The need to market, to gather, to refuse the idea that a person can simply vanish from the world without ceremony has not changed. You carry every burial your ancestors ever performed in the structure of how your grief works, in the way your brain refuses to stop predicting someone who no longer exists to be predicted, in the way community presence regulates your nervous system, in the way you reach for objects and places that still hold the shape of who they were. The next time you find yourself doing something at a funeral that you cannot explain rationally, something that feels too old for words, something that your hands know before your brain does, understand what that is. That is 130,000 years of your family telling you exactly what to do. Someone you love is going to die. And when that happens, you will know in your hands and in your body and in your inability to stop looking for them in every room that you were never meant to do this alone. That is not a modern problem. That is the oldest human truth there is.